How's it going, everyone? I am Russell Clay. I am your host, and we are here with the man of the Slate breakdown, Eric Mack. How's it going, Eric?
I'm doing good. I'm not doing Matt Forte good, but I'm doing pretty well.
Hmm. I don't think there are many people in America doing Matt Forte good today. I can't imagine. I'm certainly not. But yeah, quite a night last night. Obviously, the 3 rushing touchdowns. Eric Decker going off. Apparently, this guy named Quincy Enunwa is a beast, and the Bills and Jets are, I guess, juggernauts offensively.
That Nunwa name reminds me of something from that movie that alien movie where they connected to the trees. What was that movie? It was
Oh my god, I forget. I
and
forget the
yeah, I
name.
forgot the name of the movie. It would have been a lot better punchline if I knew the name of the movie.
You
He's
know
got
what?
some
That's what.
power coming from the trees right now.
Yeah, certainly. And you know what? That's what the listeners are for. If you can remember what movie we're thinking about right now, throw it in the comments, and we will be very appreciative. So since that game already happened, I guess we'll just jump into the 1 o'clock games on Sunday. First one here: Bengals and
Avatar.
Steelers.
Avatar.
Huh?
I just remembered it's Avatar, the name of the
Avatar. There you go. Yeah,
movie.
we're bad for not remembering that.
Yeah.
Bengals and Steelers. So what are we looking at here? 48 and a half projected game total, pretty even matchup. What are you
Yeah.
seeing here?
Well, I think the game total is based on the quality of the receivers on both sides. Antonio Brown and AJ Green both had very good days in week one, but the quality of the defenses and the familiarity of the two opponents, I think, will limit the scoring in this game. Now, that last year they did have a big game in there with a high scoring total, but the playoff game was played close to the vest, 18-16. I think this game will be played closer to the vest. It's at Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh will try to control the game. D'Angelo Williams has been outstanding in place of Le'Veon Bell, and they will keep riding him. But that Bengals defense is a little better than you might expect, and they're pretty good in the secondary. They've been one of the tougher teams against Antonio Brown. Brown's averaged about 145 yards against non-Bengals opponents and under 85 against the Bengals. So maybe not a week for Brown, maybe not a week to be excited by Big Ben or his targets. So this is a game that I might not be leaning heavily on for fantasy purposes.
I think that's a fair call. And, you mentioned they played 3 times last year. In-division rivalries are always different. I mean, we look at, the Rams. When the Rams play the Seahawks, they always play them tough. And it's like
Yeah,
sometimes when you just get those reps over and over again against the same team, the initial, amazingness of some of these players wear off. Now, I still do like AJ Green and Antonio Brown as sort of high end wide receiver ones, but again, I think we might want to hedge off a little this week instead of last week. I think it was pretty much all systems go with Antonio Brown, pretty much regardless of price. I think this week we can maybe think about diving down a little bit into some of these mid-range and even an Odell Beckham just at the top there as well.
Yeah, well, we'll get into Beckham later. That's a tasty matchup. If you're going with a player in this Bengals-Steelers game, Jeremy Hill's a decent cash game play. He's good for a short touchdown just about every week. He's got 8 TDs in his past 9 games, and he had a touchdown in that wild card game against the Steelers. So he's a low-ceiling guy, perhaps, but he does have a floor that's pretty good with getting a touchdown.
Certainly. Yeah, he definitely has all the goal line work there. As opposed to Gio Bernard. AJ Green, I'm okay with firing him out there. As far as the rest of that Bengals offense, though, it might have just been the Redskins being horrible, but I kind of liked what I saw from the Steelers defense in week one, especially Ryan Shazier. Now, they're not going to look like that every week, obviously, but I do think there was a little something to that week one.
Yeah, the pass game for the Steelers defense might be the trick. Their secondary is not as quality as their guys up front.
Certainly. Is there anyone else in this matchup you're really looking at, or sort of taking a little edge off this game?
I'm taking a little edge off. There's some 4 o'clock games that I really, really like. So I'm going to be a little colder on these 1 o'clocks.
Gotcha. And next up here, a very interesting game in my opinion. The Titans versus the Lions. Pretty regular, game total. Lions pretty much projected to roll at home, favored by 6. What are you seeing here? I might have some ideas.
Well, I think the Lions defense showed very little against Andrew Luck, so it might be an opportunity for some value on Marcus Mariota. Maybe if you're going for rushing and throwing touchdowns, that makes Tajay Sharp a little interesting. Delaney Walker, who was a disappointment last week, might be a good option with a rebound week. DeMarco Murray, it was impressive to see what he does in the passing game. So on volume, rushing and receiving, Murray is going to be interesting. I'm a little colder on Abdullah and Theo Riddick against the Titans. The Titans did a very good job, actually, against Adrian Peterson last week. So if the Lions are going to have an offensive week, again, it's probably going to come in the passing game. I think Golden Tate and Eric Ebron are the guys there.
I certainly agree on the Lions side. What we saw last week with that Lions offense was essentially the absolute best case scenario for the running backs. I mean, Theo Riddick only got, I believe, 12 or 13 touches, and obviously he went off, but that Colts defense is just going to be like that all year, making people look really good. So, same goes for Abdullah. And I mean, I do like Stafford again, but like you mentioned, I think we might be looking a little more towards Eric Ebron and Golden Tate this week, as opposed to, the dump offs that go for long touchdowns. I think that's going to be a little hard to rely on this week. But yeah, you already mentioned it. The guy I'm kind of looking at is Marcus Mariota, especially on DraftKings, at only 6K. Basically, a punt quarterback who I think is actually facing a relatively, fantasy relevant defense that he could, take advantage of. So I'm a little undecided on whether it's Tajay Sharp or Delaney Walker that you want to stack with him. Depending on it sounds like Darius Slay is going to be on Tajay Sharp. If that's the case, I'll probably be moving my exposure to Delaney Walker, but I think both are pretty viable, but mostly I just want Mariota, I think.
Yeah, the Lions defense last week made some mediocre Colts tight ends look great. They went for 7 catches, 88 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Delaney Walker gets in the end zone here.
Yeah, no kidding. When Jack Doyle's the leading fantasy tight end, something's up for sure.
Yeah.
Next up here, Ravens Browns, and the Ravens are the week one all. I have no idea. This might be good. Like, their defense might be really good, especially after what we saw from the Bills yesterday. Are the Ravens good, Eric?
I don't think they're good, but they are better than the horrible team they were a year ago. It makes a difference to have Joe Flacco there. I think Justin Forsett is a solid play against this Browns defense. I think we get 21-20 at 1 out of Forsett. I think the best thing to say about the Browns is with Josh McCown in at quarterback, Gary Barnidge is a lot more significant. Barnidge averaged 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown in McCown's starts last year, and his numbers paled in comparison when other quarterbacks started. So this could be a good Barnidge week, and he was a Ravens beater last year. He went 15 catches, 230 yards, and 1 touchdown in the 2 meetings. So we'll cut those numbers in half and even take a portion of them for his price after the goose egg he posted last week.
No kidding. And I will throw a little plug your way. I think you were on that Ravens Bills game, maybe not being so exciting. And let me tell you what, it was not exciting at all.
There's going to be a lot of games with the Ravens, and this is one of them where They're just beating the hell out of each other. It's an old throwback game. But if you're looking that way and you want a Ravens guy other than Forsett, maybe Dennis Pitta. Joe Flacco loves using his tight end, and Dennis Pitta showed that he can still do some things after not being in the league since 2014. So maybe Pitta as a low guy, basement priced tight end might be an option for you.
Certainly, yeah. And Dennis Pitta, obviously a long road back after, multiple hip injuries. But yeah, certainly good to see him there. And I mean, this could be the week. It doesn't seem like Max Williams is really ready yet to sort of take on that starting tight end role. So certainly interesting there. And as you mentioned, I'm on Barnage. I could maybe sneak in a little Duke Johnson. I am a Corey Coleman lover, but I think I'm going to be taking, a few weeks off to really see how they use him without RG3, because I mean, what I saw, I watched Coleman's targets last week. The big catch he had, I mean, he was triple covered, and
Yeah.
and Robert Griffin just literally threw it to him anyway. I mean, I could not believe he threw that ball when I watched it, but I mean, I think that's what we're gonna be kind of looking at, and I love Coleman, but he might be more of a decoy right now, with the way this offense might be situated.
I do like the Browns backs. I don't like them in the matchup against the Ravens front. The Ravens defense up front can get after you.
Certainly. Next one up, maybe a little more fantasy relevant here. Redskins and Cowboys. What's your takes here?
I think the fantasy relevance is going to be a little mitigated by the fact the Redskins played on Monday night, and the Cowboys still have Dak Prescott at quarterback. It was interesting to see D'Angelo Williams rip the Redskins on the ground. So if you're going for a guy, let's go with Ezekiel Elliott, and maybe even his backup getting some numbers, Alfred Morris, facing his former team in the Redskins. So it's the run game for the Cowboys. You got to hate what Prescott did with Dez Bryant in week 1 against the Giants. The Giants had what was a bad secondary. A lot of the work the Cowboys did was underneath with Beasley and Witten. Witten has had good numbers against the Redskins. He's had 8+ catches in each of the past 2 games against them. So if you're going with a pass game option, it's probably Witten, but I think this is a run-heavy game for Elliott, and a good week to go with him, the rookie.
Yeah, definitely agree there. And it's a super bummer, basically what's looking like another down year for Dez Bryant. It's not his fault. It's kind of like those years with Larry Fitzgerald when the Cardinals were just going through like John Skelton.
Yeah.
And, like you're sitting there like watching the game, like, I know Larry Fitzgerald is a superstar. Like, what's going on here?
Just throw him the damn ball.
Yeah. And I mean, I think we're kind of looking at that situation this year where Dez still is an unbelievable talent and will have, he'll make some touchdowns happen just because he's Dez Bryant. But I mean, as far as DFS, this just isn't, it's just not a good offense for it. So yeah, as you mentioned, Zeke is kind of the guy I'm looking at. As you mentioned, D'Angelo Williams looked real good against this Redskins defense. This Cowboys O-line is awesome. I expect Zeke to get it going this week. I'm still okay with Jason Witten pretty much in all formats with the floor I expect if Dak continues to, dink and dunk like he has been. But yeah, beyond that, I mean, Cole Beasley maybe as a punt, but nobody really on the Cowboys. Deshaun Jackson could be interesting as a tournament flyer. And I always like Jordan Reed, but yeah, I'm not really touching Cousins this week either. You always worry about the Cowboys just controlling the game and just running out the clock.
I will say the Dallas Cowboys secondary is probably better than you think. They did a decent job against Eli Manning, and the Cowboys played like a 1916 game last December, and while Cousins did have 3 TDs, he was limited to 176 yards passing. So if they keep him out of the end zone and make this a field goal game, you're going to be disappointed in your Redskins plays.
There you go. That could definitely be the case. I'm still excited to see Josh Doctson on the field. Obviously not a fantasy relevant guy yet. So yeah, I think that's kind of what we're looking at there. But anyway, nobody cares about the Redskins Cowboys when we're about to talk about the Saints and Giants here.
Oh
So
man, how many
I think we
how
go ahead.
many people won money on loading this game, this matchup in last year? Drew Brees went for 505 and 7 touchdowns. Manning went for 350 and 6. And I'll tell you what, the Saints secondary might even be worse. Their top three corners. The number one guy had started all of one game. He's in his second year, and that one game they gave up over 300 yards to Derek Carr, and the two other guys are rookies. So Odell Beckham should have a field day. I know he didn't have as great of numbers as you might expect in that game last year, but Beckham working against those guys is a home run. Victor Cruz, huge value. I'll give myself a little pat on the back. I said he'd get in the end zone last week. He did, and he played 50 of the Giants' 56 snaps against the Cowboys, and I think this is a good game that lines up well for him working across the middle and getting the end zone as well.
That was certainly a call that I'm like, man, nobody else is on that. So that's a pretty interesting one. Yeah, you know what? He's back. Obviously we're not going to be expecting, 1,500 yards like he had that one year, but if he can come in and be, that second / third receiver with Sterling Shepard, this offense is going to be a well-oiled machine. Yeah. So obviously I love all the Giants. In fact, I think I kind of like the Giants more than the Saints, at least in terms of I just worry about those Breeze home road splits. He's just so good in the dome, and that's where it was last year. I think, as you mentioned, I mean, the Saints secondary is atrocious. So I think Odell Beckham's basically the best play of the week. In all formats, I'm firing away with him and everything. Rashad Jennings might even be an interesting guy I'm looking at. He's not cheap, but on both sites, he's a pretty reasonable price, and he might be one of the few guys you get at low-ish. I won't say low-ish ownership in this game.
Well, you're going to have a lot of opportunities in the red zone because the Saints will allow the Giants to move the ball. One thing I will say for the Saints side, if you are fading Breeze because of his road splits, the Giants secondary, they're very strong on the corners with Janoris Jenkins and Cromartie and the rookie Eli Apple. But the safety spots, they're more of run game safeties. So they play well against the run. They struggle against tight ends and backs. So I know Kobe Fleener was a big dud last week, but maybe Fleener sneaks in there and has a big week against the Giants, who are fairly susceptible over the middle. Beasley and Witten did damage, so maybe it's Ingram and Fleener or Willie Snead, maybe even running over the middle against the Giants. And I think both quarterbacks pushing 300 yards and 3 touchdowns makes this game even more intriguing, because once they get going, there's no stopping either side.
Now, that's certainly a possibility with Drew Brees. I mean, if he starts to get going against this this Giants defense, I think it could just be all over either way. I certainly think in tournaments you want to, get Drew Brees shares and Willie Snead, Brandon Cooks. And as you mentioned, so the two guys that are a bit contrarian this week are going to be Kobe Fleener and I kind of like the rookie there, Michael Thomas. As you mentioned, they're not very good on the interior. And I think those two could take advantage in the red zone, especially. So that's something I'm looking at. But as far as cash game options, I think Willie Snead's the guy. Just because his price on DK is only $5,800. So I mean, that's just so cheap. I think that's kind of the guy you have to get exposure to in that game.
Yeah, and he'll be probably more matched up on Eli Apple because in the nickel defense, Cromartie goes inside on the slot and Apple stays on the outside. So Des Bryant had some opportunities against Apple where Dak Prescott didn't take advantage. Drew Brees is far too accurate to not take advantage.
Yes, certainly. I will say Drew Brees made Robert Meacham a fantasy relevant man, and he got him a contract in San Diego. So I believe Drew Brees can do just about anything.
Can Drew
Next.
Brees find value in the 49ers at the
Okay. Maybe not everything. Yeah. So 49ers, Panthers. I mean, Panthers favored by 13. That pretty much says it all. I I love Chip Kelly and his creativity, but he just does not have the horses to score. I just don't see how they're going to score in this Panthers defense. Obviously, the Broncos aren't the strongest passing team, but I mean, they have a really strong running game. So I don't think we're looking at anything like that for the 49ers this week.
Yeah, the Carlos Hyde running all over the Rams on Monday night was a bit surprising to me. But when you look at this game, the Panthers coming off a loss, the 49ers coming off a Monday night victory, 49ers on a short week, the 49ers traveling to the East Coast to play the early start game against the defending NFC champions off a loss, and the champions had those extra days of rest from that Thursday night opener. All this lines up to be a knockout for the Panthers, which if you're looking for a knockout, it's going to be Cam Newton doing the damage. I think Calvin Benjamin had a great return in week 1 against a very good Broncos defense. And if you look at that Panthers game, a lot of Benjamin's work came in the first half when they were up big. And when they were kind of trying to run out the clock in the game, they went away from Benjamin. They won't do that here. They'll stay with their guy early and often. So Benjamin, Cam Newton, good plays. A little bit concerned about Jonathan Stewart. He might not play in this one. And if he doesn't, it's going to be tough running against that 49ers front that surprised me. They were very, very good against Todd Gurley. So if you're concerned about what Gurley can do, you're probably less concerned about Jonathan Stewart banged up, or whoever the Panthers go with would be a Fozzie Whitaker or Cameron Artis-Payne. And there's another guy in there I'm missing. But I mean, go ahead.
Mike Tolbert.
Yeah, Tolbert. The bowling ball.
Yeah, well, essentially, I mean, I think Kelvin Benjamin is going to be a really solid play against this matchup. As you mentioned, the run game might just not be there, other than Cam Newton purposes. So I'm kind of looking at even some of the secondary pieces in tournaments. It could be a Ted Ginn day. I just feel like this is a game where the Panthers potentially score 35. Even 40 isn't out of the question for me. I mean, I looked at the 49ers offense and that fast pace, they can get away with that against, this Rams secondary because, Robert Quinn and Aaron Donald can't get pressure in 1 second, if they're getting the ball out of their hands so quick. But this Panthers team is solid all around. It's just going to be a rough outing. I love the Panthers defense this week as well.
Yep.
As far as, I mean, what are you doing with Greg Olsen this week? Is he someone you're looking at, or is it kind of just, I'm going with Kelvin here?
Well, Greg Olsen has very good numbers at home, and he led the team with 7 catches in the opener, and he has 5 TDs in his past 7 home games. So, and because we say this is going to be a lopsided Panthers victory, I think we'll see Olsen in the end zone. And, the tight end position, if Rob Gronkowski does not play or is banged up, there's not a lot of elite options. And I think one of the safer ones, if you're not in love with Jordan Reed, is Greg Olsen.
Certainly. Next game here, Dolphins-Patriots, 42.5 over under. Patriots, favored by 6 after that really big win for them in Arizona last week. They looked tremendous for what, compared to my expectations, they looked awesome. I thought that was going to be a really rough game for them, especially without Gronk. I mean, you'd expect them to do well in this game. Dolphins were a little frisky last week. I still think the Patriots, run this game out. I like Blount quite a bit.
Yeah, the defensive front, though, for the Dolphins, you talk about Mario Williams, Cameron Wake, and Ndamukong Suh, that's about as good as it gets up front. And they really knocked each other around in Seattle last week. So that Dolphins defense has got me my interest peaked a little bit. If I'm going with Patriots, and I'm probably not going to be paying the premium for Gronk. Maybe I go with a Julian Edelman. He's got some good numbers against the Dolphins, and he went for 781-2 in the past meeting at home against the Dolphins. I know that was Tom Brady, but Jimmy Garoppolo showed in week 1 he's got a pretty good rapport with Edelman out of the box, and when you don't have a healthy Gronk, in a controlled game, when they try to get the quarterback to limit his mistakes, a guy checking down to Edelman is a pretty easy option for a guy like Garoppolo. So could be a high volume game. I don't know necessarily if he gets 150 yards against the Dolphins defense, but 6 or 7 catches, 80 yards, and a touchdown, it's pretty solid production.
Yeah, I'll be honest. That was a little surprising to me that Edelman and Garoppolo kind of picked off or picked up where Brady, left off. It didn't seem like there was much of a drop off. Obviously, the ceiling isn't quite there, but seems like Edelman's still going to have that, pretty prominent receiving role. So I do like that call quite a bit.
I'm surprised the line on this game is just 42.5. Ryan Tannehill has had 3 consecutive 300-plus yard games against the Pats. Not something that a lot of quarterbacks do against the Pats. So, that's also considering that Tom Brady's on the other side and forcing him to throw from behind. But, there might be some value in, Devontae Parker had some good numbers against the Pats last year. Maybe some value in Jarvis Landry.
Certainly. We like Landry regardless of how the game goes, just because, he's always going to be getting dump off. So yeah, like that call. We'll see about Foster too. That's certainly something to keep track of with his glass hamstrings. So certainly something to keep in mind. Chiefs Texans here. I think this is a really interesting matchup to watch. Specifically the Chiefs offense versus the Texans defense. What do you think of Spencer Ware this week? Does he, continue on this pace, or maybe Texans have a little something for him?
Well, I like what he did in the passing game. Spencer Ware showed that in the preseason. He was going to be a high-volume pass receiver, and a limited Alex Smith in a comeback situation against the Chargers last week went to Ware quite frequently. And I don't believe that Jamal Charles is going to play again, so Ware's going to be the future guy. And while they might not pound the ball on the ground against the Texans front, Ware is going to be impacting the game, and particularly interesting in PPR formats. I know FanDuel is a half point, but Ware put up big numbers, and he'll be involved in the game, whether it's a close game and it's a ground game, or a wide open game and it's a passing game. So it makes him interesting. Andy Reid has a way with making these running backs very productive for us.
There is absolutely no doubt about that. As you mentioned, even in comeback mode, he was the guy. Didn't seem like Charkandrick West really played into that in terms of stealing snaps at all. So I like him again. I do think it's a bit of a tougher test with this Texans team, but again, I don't think you're looking for 200 total yards, So I think our expectations are tempered correctly there. As far as this Texans offense, dashed a little bit last week early on in the run game, and I mean Danny Woodhead was even running on him a little later in the game. So is that something you're looking at with Lamar Miller, or maybe not?
I think Miller's intrigue is still going to be in the passing game. He's coming off a solid effort, 106 yards, but it was a high volume type performance. I think I'm intrigued to see what Brock Osweiler does with Miller in the passing game. And I'm also a little worried about Andre Hopkins, not necessarily worried because his production, but his quarterback situation, and having Will Fuller now taking some targets. The rookie came in and did pretty well in his first game, 5 catches for 107 yards and a touchdown. And that basically just chopped numbers that were usually all over Hopkins, who is a lonely guy in the offense. Now they got a secondary option to use. So Hopkins won't be that certain every week cash game play that he's been. So we'll see more. We'll get more information as Brock Osweiler goes here. But I think there's going to be some good production out of Miller out of the backfield.
So Will Fuller was the guy I think throughout the process kind of went a little underrated. He was a first round pick, and it just seemed like he wasn't anyone's favorite. And I mean, he's out there, and it just looks like he's back at Notre Dame catching touchdowns. I mean, it doesn't really seem like this was that big of a transition for him, and some guys are just like that. So I think he's going to be that deep threat, as you mentioned. This is going to affect DeAndre Hopkins a little bit. I still love him, but yeah, in terms of target share and more efficient with his targets this year. But yeah, some of that production, he's got someone else to sort of take a little of the load off him this year.
Now, if it was more of a wide open passing game and a quarterback who could put up 350 every week, you wouldn't worry about it. But the Texans offense lines up to be a 240 yard type passing game per week, not a 310. So
yeah, definitely agree there. As far as this next game here, I am a Rams fan. I don't know if I mentioned that last week, Eric.
Whoops. Sorry, I jinxed your boys.
I was so angry from the first quarter of just everything that happened. It just seems like the 49ers came out, punched them in the mouth, and they just didn't really know how to respond. I will say, I think, again, I mentioned with the 49ers, I think the fast pace of the 49ers offense really limited all the upside of their, Aaron Donald and Robert Quinn. But I mean, I'm certainly not optimistic after week one. That's for sure.
Yeah, and if you weren't optimistic after playing in San Francisco, a place they should have been able to handle, now they get the Seahawks. And the Seahawks, I know Russell Wilson might not be 100%, but they're a little ticked that the Rams took 2 from them last year. So the Seahawks are coming in here hungry. I think are coming in with Thomas Rawls as a starter now. So you saw what Carlos Hyde did against the Rams front. I don't think the Rams defense is bad in any stretch, and I think their defensive front will stop the run. But the Seahawks are going to pound Rawls, and I think Rawls will get good numbers. He was limited last week, they said, and he got 15 touches. I think this could be a 20-touch, 100-yard and a touchdown game for Rawls.
Yeah, and initially I was a little on the Rams defense if, Russell Wilson and the reports came out that he was really limited or, rehab wasn't going all that well and it was worse than we expected. But it just seems like from what I've heard, he's been rehabbing 20 hours a day, not getting any sleep and being Russell Wilson. So if that's the case, it probably means, he's going to be fine out there. And, I mean, he tends to pick up the pace a little bit, at least, as you mentioned. If they get rolling, Rawls is going to get rolling, and it could just be, a mountain of rubble falling on the Rams once again.
Yeah, I will say Todd Gurley is an outstanding talent, but what the quarterback situation does is it takes him out of the game because they just load the box against him and throw bodies at him. It's a dangerous situation for Gurley because he's going to get pounded on until they develop something downfield. They're going to need to find the quarterback situation. I just read on Roto World before coming on this show that Jared Goff might not play at all this year. I was hoping maybe he'd come in and do some damage because Gurley's elite fantasy potential is going out the window because of a bad, lopsided offense that has no quarterback play.
You guys probably couldn't see me, but I just put my hand over my eyes. I put my forehead down when he was talking because this offense is just not going to work with Case Keenum. And I'm not mad at Case Keenum. He knows too. Like, you just watch him come off after the series are over, and he's just like, guys, like, I shouldn't be in right now. Like, that's just the way he looks out there, and he knows. And he can't get the ball there. From what it sounded like from the 49ers, they pretty much knew what the play was going to be because it was so obvious with the limited, ability of their quarterback. Teams just know when they're going to run. As you mentioned, I saw a stat by PFF that Gurley 52 yards after contact, and he only had 47 rushing yards, And it's just like, oh my
He's getting
God.
hit in the backfield quite a bit. That says a lot about that 49ers front, by the way.
Yeah, I'm actually pretty impressed by them. But I will say overall, yeah, you just can't expect much. I still love Gurley. I'm going to be playing him some weeks. This is not the one though. Anyway, next game here. Let's move on. Buccaneers versus Cardinals. This is a pretty fun one.
Yeah, I think this could get loose. The best part about this game is we saw Jameis Winston throw 4 touchdowns against the Falcons defense. I thought was actually pretty good in the secondary. They were tough on quarterbacks in fantasy last year and decent against wide receivers. And Jameis Winston lit them up for 4 touchdowns. So even if you expect the Cardinals come out of the gate hot against a mediocre Bucs defense and score a lot of points, Jameis Winston is going to keep this interesting. And whether it's a close game or a blowout, Winston's going to be throwing downfield and running this number up. So it's a good game to get in on. I think you go Winston and Evans as the premium guys on that side, and then everybody on the Cardinals: Palmer, Johnson, Floyd, Fitzgerald, the kicker if you're in FanDuel games. I can't make a whole lot of sense out of John Brown, Jaron Brown, and J.J. Nelson, but they could get involved in some way if you want a real deep sleeper. And Jermaine Gresham showed some things. So I think there's a lot to love on the Cardinals side, which are therefore, because of Winston's juice, some things to love on the Bucs side as well.
Certainly agree. Definitely looking at David Johnson as a guy that you can exploit in this matchup. Michael Floyd, I love that. Carson Palmer, I'm a little indifferent on him. I just feel like every week, in cash games, you love him because he's getting 300 and at least 2, like bare minimum. That's pretty much what he's doing every time. But I feel like at most he's getting like 350 and 3. And I love that for cash. He's definitely a cash game option this week. I just think with this Giants, Saints game looming, I'm a little worried about his upside in a tournament.
Yeah. Because that Saints Giants game will get real loose.
Right. And as far as his receiving weapons, though, I love Floyd. I think that's a great value play. And as you mentioned, Fitzgerald. So yeah, no, I love the offense. I think Carson Palmer's a cash game guy as well. That should be a really solid offensive effort. Winston, I like him as a play. Mike Evans, that might be a tough matchup for him, right?
Yeah, well, the Cardinals have a very good defense and a strong secondary, and they can get after the quarterback. So there are some reasons to think that maybe the Cardinals just knock this one out of the park and shut down the Bucs. But I think Winston is just that extraordinary that he can make this interesting. Not necessarily like Andrew Luck in Denver, but there's a lot to love about what Winston did last week. So I think there is some hope that the Cardinals, even though they're ticked off about losing that opener to the Pats, that looked like it was all in their favor, but with no Gronk and no Brady, they're going to score points. But I think the Bucs are going to score points on the other side, no matter the score.
Yeah, I think there might be something special here with Winston. As you mentioned, I mean, that wasn't a necessarily easy matchup last week. So, him both in the passing game, to his tight ends, to his big hulking receivers, and even Charles Sims out of the backfield. Certainly some potential in that offense.
Yeah, I wouldn't touch the running game on the Bucs side. I think the Cardinals front is going to shut down Martin.
That's definitely fair. All right, so this is the both these teams always play from behind. I have no idea who's actually going to win game. Yeah.
Someone will have to be leading in this game.
These are both teams that I base their fantasy value on. Okay, they're going to be down 21-0 in the first quarter. Danny Woodhead's going to be getting, dump offs on 10 third downs in a row in the fourth.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, obviously it was different last week with the Chargers, getting up in that lead, but third quarter, I mean, seems like it's Danny Woodhead's show once again this year.
They blew it. And I actually liked what Gordon did on the ground. But I love both sides of this game. As you're saying, I don't think the total of 47.5 does this game justice because both defenses, while they showed some spurts of ability last week, I think are going to be suspect against both of these quarterbacks who are kind of gunslinger types. This matchup last year was 31-25 in the Chargers' favor. This one's in San Diego, and I know Rivers is without Keenan Allen for the year now, but Rivers has been without an elite wideout for most of his career. He went 304 against the Jags last year in this matchup. Antonio Gates went 453-2 against the Jags. I think Gates with no Allen becomes intriguing. If you're looking for the receiver that might replace the production of Allen, I think it's Tyrell Williams because of his size. The other guys are more like smaller, shifty guys, that run out of the slot and cross. Tyrell Williams is more of a guy to get downfield like Allen would. Love the Cardinals offense against the Jags defense, and then therefore love the Jags offense against the Chargers defense. The running backs, the receivers, it won't matter. Get into this game. I think this is a game that's going to get looser than the 47.5 suggests.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that score from last year's game as something I'm potentially looking at here. And more to do with the defenses. I was listening to a Chargers-Jags breakdown by Hank Jones and Kyle Posey, and they were talking about how they cover these two teams, and they were talking about how really the linebackers in this game are super exploitable. So I'm looking at, as you mentioned, Gates, Woodhead, Yeldon again, I think with Ivory potentially missing this game. I think those are guys to look at. And then, you mentioned it, Tyrell Williams looking pretty good last week. I think we can look at him to at least assume some of that role. I like this game quite a bit, especially the running game.
Yeah, and I think both quarterbacks, 303, and that's kind of what you'd expect out of Blake Bortles playing against another quarterback that'll put up numbers. He'll keep pace like he showed last year with 35 touchdown passes.
Certainly. Falcons Raiders here, basically a 50 projected point total. Oh boy, I don't know.
I like these 4:00 games. I like the Falcons, Matt Ryan against the Raiders. Both defense, while I thought they would be decent defenses, they were two of the worst in fantasy last week against opposing quarterbacks. And Matt Ryan and Derek Carr are 30-plus passers with a whole bunch of weapons on both sides. And I'm not sure of Sanu's health, but Sanu added in a level of intrigue to the Falcons side. One thing I'm worried about with the Falcons is the timeshare between Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman. Freeman used to be the bell cow back. Tevin Coleman was a bit banged up out of the gate last year, but Coleman even produced 5 for 95 in the passing game, which he wasn't a passing receiver last year, so a passing receiving back. So that cuts a lot into Freeman's daily fantasy value. But I like both sides, and I think the wide open nature of this game should leave good numbers for the backs out of the backfield and the receivers downfield.
Yeah, I was really excited about Tevin Coleman last year. I did not ever expect him to be a receiving threat like what he's sort of at least emerged into this one game. I still do like Freeman, but yeah, as you mentioned, in a DFS perspective, I think we're kind of waiting it out this week with him, maybe taking a gamble on Freeman. As far as Julio, I'm cool with throwing him out there, but I do like some of the other top options over him, like Odell Beckham and even an Antonio Brown. So that's what you're looking at there. I like Crabtree this week in the Raiders passing game. Cooper has kind of a tough matchup against Trufant. Other than that, I don't know how much I'm looking at the Raiders this week.
Well, I'm going to say it's going to get just as loose as last week. And now it could be that Jameis Winston was just that good to make the Falcons look that bad. But I think, Derek Carr, Cooper, and Crabtree are a better set than what the Bucks have. And this is the Raiders at home. So I think the numbers could be even better for the Raiders side passing wise. And it's interesting to say that despite the discrepancy in price in daily fantasy, Michael Crabtree was the guy they threw the game-winning 2-point conversion throw to over Cooper. So Crabtree is more of the value than Cooper. I think there's still some high ceiling potential in Crabtree. And when you look at Cooper and Crabtree working together and off each other with a Derek Carr, there's some good numbers to be coming from that Raiders offense.
I mean, I definitely agree on Crabtree. We'll see. You won all of our battles last week.
Did we? Did I? I don't remember. I was trying to think how those matchups went down. I know I got a lot of things wrong last week. I must have the few things I got right.
You must have sneaked them by through me. No, but yeah, that's an interesting one for sure. I think there's definitely upside. I just worry a little bit about Trufant with Cooper. So from what you hinted at, I think you might kind of be with me on this Colts-Broncos game. What are you looking at for this Colts offense this week?
Well, there's a few things that the Colts and Broncos, these are two teams that we're going to be heavily involved with in fantasy this year. There was three things that I learned from week one. C.J. Anderson is this year's Arian Foster in a Gary Kubiak running back friendly scheme. He's going to be a monster because they rely on the feature back, and also his backups didn't get any of the touches, and he impacted the passing game as well. So it's a lot of C.J. Anderson with Trevor Siemian at quarterback. Andrew Luck is healthy after a rough year last year with his health, and he makes just about anybody in his offense that much better because he's just so outstanding. But the Broncos defense is still really tough on fantasy quarterbacks. Cam Newton came out of the box fast in that week one opener, but that Broncos defense shut him down in the second half. So I'm not necessarily on Luck in this given week because of the matchup, but I am all over C.J. Anderson. The Colts' bad defense overall and very poor against the Lions running backs were Amir Abdullah and Theo Riddick. C.J. Anderson, after what he did to a very good Panthers defense, I think you could expect huge numbers out of Anderson at home later in the evening. Limited Trevor Siemian. I think huge numbers for Anderson.
Yeah, I'm totally with that. And I'm a guy who was a little late to the party on CJ Anderson, even after his great stretch run. 2 years ago, I wasn't really totally in. This was all I needed last week. Just a dominant performance against a really strong defense. Now they're going up against the Colts. Give me Anderson in pretty much every lineup. I'm not afraid to go 100% exposure unless you're worried about, a potential injury or something. So all systems go for him. I think Andrew Luck could get a little frisky, especially in comeback mode. But yeah, as you mentioned, it's just a tough matchup. I do think there is a little upside with him, but maybe more in the terms of you take a chance on one of his weapons, maybe a Moncrief or something like that. I don't know about Luck overall, but yeah, I think this is a game where I'm kind of looking at an Emmanuel Sanders in the Broncos passing game, even though I don't like Trevor Siemian. I just think the Colts defense is such a liability right now that Emmanuel Sanders might be a guy. Yeah. So I think Sanders is a guy that could potentially take advantage of this matchup.
Yeah, and then when you're looking at the Luck thing, I think there's many weeks you'd expect the basement to be 303 for Luck. I think that might be the ceiling. So it's a low ceiling against a Broncos team that's not going to push the pace. They're going to slow it down with Anderson.
Certainly. Kind of I guess last game was slower paced, but after a string of higher paced, high scoring games, we're looking at the Packers and Vikings. Vikings are a pretty tough defense. Packers, while they did well, certainly not optimal week one performance. What are you looking at here?
Well, I think Rodgers, as many weeks you can love Rodgers, and like Luck, this is just not one of them. At Minnesota, they're opening the U.S. Bank Stadium. Rodgers had just 212 yards passing at Minnesota last season, and then the Packers actually lost their January 3rd meeting in Green Bay, 20-13 to the Vikings. So the Vikings are one of the teams that you don't consider Rodgers against, and I particularly don't consider them at Minnesota opening a new stadium. So I'm going to be a little wary of Jordy Nelson, any of the targets. I think if there's anybody you consider on the Packers, it might be Eddie Lacy, because he does have at least 100 yards rushing or a touchdown in 5 of his past 6 games against the Vikings. But that's more of a lower-end Vikings team in the past. That defense is rising up to be one of the better ones in football. I think Sam Bradford in a quarterback does help Adrian Peterson. I'm just not in love with him against the Packers' run defense. I think he's more of a 60 yards and a touchdown type performance here. I think if you're going with someone, maybe let's go with Kyle Rudolph. The Packers gave up a league high 112 yards to tight ends in week 1. So there is some opportunities for Rudolph off the play action if they're loading the box on Peterson.
I like that call. And I do think the Packers' run defense looked much improved this year, at least in week 1. So yeah, that's an interesting call. Maybe they catch him on a blitz or something.
Yeah.
And the Monday night game here, I like this game.
Yeah, I do too. And I think the number
Eagles and Bears, I don't quite agree with this 42.5 projected total. I actually really like quite a few players in this game.
Yeah, I think while John Fox is a defensive-minded head coach, he doesn't have the horses on defense to really play low-scoring, tight football games. And when you're talking about the Eagles against the Bears, I think the offenses might be a little weaker than you might like in a primetime matchup, but I think the defenses are suspect enough where each team can put good numbers up on each other. I think Jeremy Langford is a high-volume play against the Eagles. They were the worst in the run against the run in 2015, and they actually gave up 5.7 yards per rush against a bad Browns offense last week. So that should be very good numbers for the volume of touches that Langford gets. Langford got, I believe it was around 20 touches, and his backup got just 1. So he's kind of the Matt Forte of this Bears offense, passing and rushing, and against an Eagles front that's not too stiff. I think we should get good numbers out of Langford.
Yeah, I like Langford. I even last night, when things kind of get weird, you start looking at Jay Cutler, and you say, huh, yeah, that's really cheap. And then, you don't tell anyone, and then you take him out of your lineups in the morning. But, like sometimes it kind of looks intriguing. No, I'm joking, but as far as Alshon Jeffrey goes, I think he's kind of another intriguing option in this offense. Obviously looked really solid last week, making some leaping, Alshon Jeffrey grabs 40 yards down the field. So nice to see him healthy again. I think he's a borderline cash play. But as far as the Bears go, I think you mentioned him. Langford is the guy that you're really looking at in that offense as well.
Yeah, the matchup is tantalizing, and I love in those fantasy games having the Monday night horse going for you. So it's just late points that if you need him, you get him, and he's going to get a lot of touches in that offense.
Certainly. And as far as the Eagles go, I'm not totally sold on Carson Wentz yet, but I do like Jordan Matthews. Zach Ertz out. That's kind of a bummer because I'm a big fan of Zach Ertz, but we're just going to see targets funneled in Jordan Matthews' direction. And I think he is, one of the safest wide receiver options we have this week.
Yeah, a high volume receiver, and it's good to see the rookie getting the ball to his number one receiver. It's something that Dak Prescott failed at. But if you're looking for checkdowns, I actually have to update that Ertz out news. Looking for checkdowns. Ryan Matthews is a pass receiver, and when the Fox defensive game plan is to avoid big plays, checkdowns and underneath guys like Matthews can be interesting.
Certainly agree there. Again, I think you can look at Vegas and trust it in some sense. Vegas does know things.
Yeah, they do know more than me. You're right.
It's incredible how close they get sometimes. But overall, I'm tending to trust myself and sort of the fantasy breakdown of this over maybe the Vegas line this week.
All right, man. I'm with you.
Yeah, good. So I think that's kind of the main review of the slate. As always, make sure to check out dailyfantasycafe.com and check out this article. It's all here for you. We got Eric's full breakdown of the slate. I'm on there, doing podcasts and a bunch of other stuff. So make sure to check that out. And we appreciate you guys. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel, and we'll see you guys next week.